Libs of TikTok has this. It's a video giving teachers tips on how to make classrooms more trans inclusive, because that, of course, should be our goal. Let's listen to this.
Hi, I'm Jack. My pronouns are they, them, and I identify as trans and non-binary. Here are 3 things you can do to support trans children in your school. Number 1, be a visible trans ally. There are lots of ways to do this, from having trans-inclusive flags in your classroom to having trans-inclusive storybooks on your bookshelves. Number 2, stop unnecessarily gendering things in your school. This ranges from easy changes, like not grouping children into boys and girls, to not having gendered uniforms. Consider how excluded trans and especially non-binary children and staff may feel about gendered spaces and policies. And number 3, teach children about pronouns, what they are, how we use them, and why they're important. This allows trans people to not be singled out for their pronouns, and instead makes pronouns part of the norm.
You know, we can make all the usual points here that this is not what schools are supposed to do. This is not what the classroom is for. This is not education. This is a form of religious indoctrination. To promote transgenderism in the class is a violation of the separation of church and state that we always hear about. It's a violation of many other things as well, but it is also religious indoctrination. But rather than dwelling on those points this time, I want to make a different observation. Because there's one thing you said that jumped out at me, maybe slightly subtle. I don't know if you picked up on it. Amid all the usual insanity, he said, especially non-binary kids, especially. So he's talking about the challenges faced by, quote, trans and non-binary kids, even though there are no such thing as trans and non-binary kids, or adults for that matter. But he's discussing the challenges or whatever, and he says, especially non-binary. And that's because there's a shift happening. We should take note of this. There is a shift happening at the top of the victim pyramid. And we've talked about the victim pyramid many times on this show. This is the victim hierarchy. There is a hierarchy of victimhood on the left, and there's this perpetual jostling and the war at the top. Like, who's the uber victim? What group can claim status as the uber super victims? And if you're at that if you're at the top of the victim hierarchy, it means that it's kind of almost an inverted hierarchy, because it means that you cannot be guilty of victimizing anyone else, but everyone is always victimizing you. And victimhood is power, so it means that you have power. It's a very inverted, upside down, sort of topsy-turvy system, but that's the system. Don't be distracted by parties and presents this holiday season. Instead, join Hallow's most anticipated prayer challenge of the year, Pray 25. Led by cast members from The Chosen, the largest Christian streaming series in history, Pray 25 will guide you through meditation and prayer for 25 days leading up to Christmas. Pray 25 will help grow your understanding of mankind and develop a disciplined prayer habit during a season when discipline is certainly put to the test. Hallow is the #1 Christian prayer app in the U.S. and the #1 Catholic app in the world. Hallow helps me make prayer a priority, and with Pray 25, it can do the same for you. Find peace and fortify your faith this Christmas with Hallow. Download the app for free and join the Pray 25 challenge. Go to hallow.com/Matt Walsh and get 3 months completely free. That's hallow.com/Matt Walsh to reclaim your peace during this holiday season. But right now, there's this shift happening where non-binary is slowly replacing trans as the most favored, most protected, most cherished group. In fact, here's a prediction for you. I think that trans as a category will fade away, like the category of lesbian has all but disappeared, as you know, because lesbian's been subsumed by trans, and the same thing's going to happen with trans. I think trans gets subsumed by non-binary. Eventually, it all is simply non-binary. Now, in effect, it's the same thing. It's the same brand of insanity. There's no real difference. They're both made up. They're both making essentially the same false claim. But the advantage of non-binary is that it's even more vague. It's even more undefinable. It's even more subjective than trans. So trans still ties itself, for one thing, to the very gender binary that it's supposedly trying to dismantle. Non-binary is meant to be apart from that entirely. And the great thing for non-binary is that there are no expectations attached to it. There's no definitions. There's just like nothing at all. It means even less than trans. And trans, when you get down to it, really doesn't mean anything either, of course. But non-binary is even more undefinable, even more absurd and vague, and it can just be whatever you want it to be, which makes it more useful to the left. It's a more useful category. The more vague, the more undefinable, the more ambiguous the category is, the more useful it is to them. And so more and more, that's what we're going to start to see. It's like trans becomes passé, it becomes old-fashioned, and the new thing is to be non-binary. And that'll do it for this portion of the show as we move over to the members block. Hope to see you there. If not, talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.